Dr. Natalie Marks, and we're back with a quick cup of knowledge. Joining me today is Dr. Jeff Applegate. He is a clinical assistant professor at NC State University and president of the Honeybee Veterinary Consortium. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You are one of our most exciting guests today because I'm so excited to hear about the lab you were just coordinating, and it was?
Honeybees.
Honeybees.
So, yeah, thank you very much. It's very cool.
Tell us more about it.
So honeybees are an interesting thing in veterinary medicine right now. About 2 years ago, the FDA changed the requirements for honeybees, so now they're considered food animals. So with that, we don't have a lot of veterinary knowledge in this country, historically, about honeybees. So what we're trying to do is really raise awareness with veterinarians about honeybees and how to manage and move forward and take good steps for protection of food supply and keeping medically important antibiotics out of honey.
And how did you get involved? How did you get interested in honeybee management?
Yeah, I've owned a hive I've been a beekeeper for about 5 years, so not that long. There's many other people that have kept hives for much, much longer, which is great. And really when this FDA veterinary feed directive issues came along, we looked at it and said, we need to organize a group of people that can reach forward and get veterinarians on the same page as the historic beekeepers.
And why is it so important for veterinarians to be involved? I know you mentioned about keeping antibiotics out of the food supply, but there's got to be other reasons. I mean, bees are so essential to the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
So bees are used for quite a lot of things: honey production, pollen production, pollination for sure. Many of the honeybees are shipped around the country to pollinate certain crops, and we need to keep that population of honeybees healthy. But the big movement right now with veterinarians in beekeeping, or using veterinarians as a role in honeybee health, is to keep antibiotics out of the food supply. So similar to a dairy cow or chickens, and keeping residues of certain drugs out of what we would eat.
And I'm sure a lot of people watching are incredibly intrigued about what would be my role as a veterinarian in doing that. So can you explain a little bit more specifically about what you were doing at the lab and what people would be learning about to get interested in this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're taking novice veterinarians and bringing them into a live hive situation so they can lift a frame and look at bees and have the opportunity to get used to the gear you have to wear for protective purposes. As well as, the next step would be to kind of help diagnose disease and treat if needed, but only, if needed, not as a preventative measure necessarily. And then to give advice, hopefully, as the future of where we're going is to give advice to beekeepers with parasitic control, with mites, or other pests that may be in the hive, such as beetles or things like this.
And how long does it take for, again, if I'm very novice, if I went to your lab and wanted to get interested, about how long does it take for a veterinarian to really feel comfortable in that role?
Yeah, I guess it's individual dependent. How our lab is set up is we spend a lot of time with the equipment, learning the verbiage of what is included in a hive, a frame, a brood box, a super, and what those different parts of the hive do and their purpose. Then we take kind of a next step and put the gear on appropriately and make sure everyone's safe. Then the next step for the lab would be to go into that live hive. To be reasonably comfortable, I think going into probably more than 10 hives on a regular basis would get you to a point where you're comfortable working around bees and get to know the bees you're working with.
And if someone like myself, living in downtown Chicago, with a very, very small backyard, wanted to get interested in having my own hive, is that something you recommend, or is this more of a role where a veterinarian be supervising and going to other sites where beekeepers are having their own hives?
Backyard hives are becoming more and more common. Where we are now in the Las Vegas area, just Henderson, the next town over, I believe, just passed legislation that people could have backyard hives. A lot of places do have backyard hives, and that's great. There's two where I come from, with North Carolina and Raleigh, and extended into Atlanta. There's a company that does urban hives. So they'll put hives on tops of buildings, and it's called Bee Downtown.
Very cool.
And they actually were very integral in helping us out with the Honeybee Veterinary Consortium lab that we did at our conference. But what they do is, they help out local places, have beehives on top of, say, buildings or in urban areas, and then share the honey. And public education about pollinators and bees and that sort of thing.
Right. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So, the $1 million question, do you ever get stung?
Yes. Yes.
I think we have to be transparent. Can you get stung doing this?
Absolutely. So you do get stung. You get used to it for those people that aren't allergic to honeybees and that sort of thing. But you do get to a point where you ultimately get stung. I know some very good beekeepers, master beekeepers, that'll walk into a hive just with no protection on because they know they're bees, and they can work them very quietly and kind of have a zen attitude with them and just walk through the hive and not get stung. It's amazing to me still, but I think that everyone should be comfortable knowing that they're probably going to get stung at some point.
And you mentioned they walk into their bees, and I think we talked about that, how you have your bees, and the bees at this lab were not your bees, right? And so it sounds like just like any pet or any dairy cow herd or anything like that, that the keepers actually know their bees well and have a sort of a personality of sorts?
Yes, and there's different types of bees that are much more calm or more aggressive. Some make honey better, some don't. But as you learn your hive and you learn like what you're working with, say my own hive in the backyard, I've gone through a couple different queens, and some of the bees are very, very quiet and easy to work with. And then we had a queen that they were not; they were much more aggressive. So you do get a sense for the bees that you're working with and how you can handle them.
And I think that also sort of relates, as we were talking about the difference between some of those bees and the Africanized bees.
Yes.
For people who are new to this topic, can you explain a little more about that?
Yeah, so how it was explained to me originally is, so there's like Spanish bees and Italian bees and Africanized bees. Italian bees tend to be very, very quiet and calm to work with, kind of like dairy cow. Your Spanish bees are more like a fighting bull, and your African bees are more like a pack of lions.
Oh.
So they can actually be relatively aggressive and problematic. Some people do work with them on a regular basis because they're great honey producers, but they're not good around public areas because they defend their hives pretty aggressively.
So that's not my first bee downtown hive.
No,
Okay.
Don't go in with an Africanized bee, no.
So for people who are probably incredibly excited and intrigued by this, if they can't make it to the lab here or to your consortium, what are some other resources out there for veterinarians that are interested in getting involved in bee medicine?
Yeah, so we're reaching out through the interwebs, right? So the hbvc.org is our website, and we're trying to get veterinary information out there for people to learn through other veterinary conferences such as AVMA, or I'm not sure exactly what the specific programs are at the other places, VMX, et cetera. But I know that there's a lot of bee education going on a regular basis now. But here at Western, we have a great bee program right now. I just left the rooms, and they're standing room only. So it's pretty popular.
It is. And it's new and hot. And is this just for the veterinarian, or can veterinary technicians get involved in this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to definitely need technicians in the future to really help out, just like we would at going on to a dairy or to a egg-laying production, or say with dogs and cats, right? So we're going to need veterinarian vet tech support in the future.
Last question for you. With the future in this, where do you see this being in 5 years? Do you see this being a college? Do you see this being a whole subspecialty? What's kind of your dream for the honeybee vets out there?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, and it's one we've talked about a lot. It's grown so quickly in the past 18 months to 2 years, to the point that we're reaching out internationally and speaking with veterinarians in Italy and about bee health. Are we going to make this an international movement, or are we going to keep it as a college and an American college? I don't know the answer. I'd like to see, I think, a bee certification for veterinarians. How to move forward with that is going to be a little bit tricky, but I think we can make something happen where there's a knowledge base for veterinarians to work closely with beekeepers.
Well, I'm ready to suit up. I really am, and get involved with Bee Downtown. This is really fascinating. It sounds like there's so much on the horizon. Just kind of sky's the limit. Thank you for all of your knowledge and for what you do for the profession. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.